White CEO found a black janitor sleeping in the supply closet. What he discovered changed everything. Subscribe for more stories. A voice, muffled and frail, came from behind the supply closet door. Please do not open that door. It was a frightened, almost fragile sound. Ethan Whitmore froze, clipboard in hand. He had been navigating the dim, narrow corridor of the B2 service level, feigning an inspection of the pipe insulation. The hallway was hushed, save for the hum of the hotel's distant mechanics and the sputter of an overhead light. His gaze shifted to the closet, an old metal cabinet in the corner. The latch was trembling, making a soft, clicking sound like fingernails tapping on steel. Ethan tilted his head, his focus sharpening. He held his breath, listening. Another muffled thud echoed from inside, followed by the soft protest of shifting weight. His heart began to beat faster. He moved closer, his boots silent on the industrial flooring. The air was thick with the scent of bleach and dust, a chemical aroma that clung to the old rags within. He reached for the handle, its cool metal a surprise against his skin. "Hello," he called, his voice steady but gentle. "Is there someone in there?" Silence. The door shuddered slightly, as if the person inside had flinched. Ethan took a deep breath, adjusted the collar of his borrowed maintenance jacket, and pulled. The hinges groaned as the metal door swung outward. Something tumbled out, a woman collapsing directly into his arms. He gasped, his arms closing around her on pure instinct. She felt nearly weightless. Her head rested against his shoulder, her limbs hanging loosely. He stumbled back but held her steady. She was dressed in the hotel's gray janitorial uniform, wrinkled and stained. Her dark hair was tangled, and her face was slick with sweat. Her breathing was rapid and shallow, and the scent of antiseptic enveloped her. Ethan stared down at her, bewildered by the situation. Her eyelids fluttered, revealing wide, panicked brown eyes. "Please," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Please do not fire me." The words struck him like a splash of icy water. The young woman was shaking. Her fingers feebly clutched his jacket before falling away. As her knees gave out, Ethan tightened his grip, preventing her from falling. She could barely stay conscious. He looked at her, his pulse racing. She had been sleeping in a closet, hiding, exhausted, and terrified of losing her job. In that moment, Ethan Whitmore, the CEO of one of the city's most luxurious hotel chains, stood in the fluorescent half-light of an underground corridor, holding a trembling janitor, and felt completely lost. She had no idea who he was, and for the first time in a long time, he felt he didn't either. Aaliyah stirred as Ethan gently placed her on a narrow cot in the employee break room. The space was stark, with buzzing lights, beige walls, and minimal furniture. Still, it was a far more dignified place to rest than a supply cabinet. He found an extra blanket and carefully draped it over her. She mumbled something he couldn't understand, her head shifting toward him. Her face was still ashen, her body limp with exhaustion. He watched her for a moment before walking to an old kettle in the corner to boil some water. Minutes later, a soft rustle from the cot caught his attention. Aaliyah blinked at the ceiling, disoriented, before her gaze found him. The fear instantly returned to her eyes. "I am so sorry," she said, her voice hoarse. She tried to sit up, pushing the blanket away. "I didn't mean to." "Hey," Ethan said softly, holding up his hands. "It's all right. You fainted. You need to rest." She looked down at her lap, her fingers twisting nervously. "You shouldn't have helped me. You could get into trouble." Ethan pulled a chair over and set a steaming mug of tea on the table between them. "No one is in trouble," he said. "Just drink this." She hesitated, then slowly took the mug in her trembling hands. After blowing on the hot liquid, she took a small sip. Her shoulders relaxed slightly, some of the tension leaving her. He watched her in silence. She looked young, maybe in her mid-20s. Her uniform was too large, the collar frayed. Her dark hair was neatly tucked behind her ears, but with a shaky imprecision. Her shoes were worn and damp from the rain. "What's your name?" he asked. She eyed him cautiously. "Aaliyah Brooks." "It's nice to meet you, Aaliyah." "I'm Ethan." She gave a small nod. not asking for more. "How long have you worked here?" he inquired. "Almost 3 months," she answered quietly. Night shifts. Silence fell between them, and he could feel her defenses rising again. "I just cleaned," she added. "Hallways, bathrooms, kitchens." Sometimes she sipped her tea. Long hours, usually 7 p.m. to 3 a.m. Ethan studied her. "That's a tough schedule." She offered a weak smile and looked away. "It's a job." There was a resignation in her voice, a hint that this was far from the worst she had faced. He leaned in slightly. "Are you okay? I mean, really?" Aaliyah's hands tightened around the mug. She took a breath. "I'm fine. Just tired. That's all." He didn't push. He recognized that tone, the one people used when trying desperately not to break down. "Do you live far from here?" he asked casually. A pause. "I manage," she replied quietly. "Sometimes I stay with a friend." She stopped, but Ethan didn't need her to finish. He already understood. He looked at her again, truly seeing past the uniform and the exhaustion. There was a sharpness in her gaze, a composure in her presence. This was not a careless person. This was a survivor. He stood, walked to a cabinet, and pulled out a small paper bag containing oatmeal cookies he'd brought for his rounds. He placed them on the table. "I made them," he said. "Not the best, but they're edible." She slowly opened the bag, and the scent of cinnamon filled the small room. Her expression softened slightly. He then took a folded note from his pocket and set it beside the cookies. "Asterisk in case you ever forget. We all need somewhere to rest sometimes." "That doesn't make us weak." Asterisk. Aaliyah stared at the note, blinking quickly, but said nothing. Ethan turned to go, pausing at the door. "You're not in trouble, Aaliyah," he said gently. "Not with me." He stepped out, letting the door close behind him. Ethan found himself observing her more than he'd planned. Aaliyah never seemed to notice. She moved through her shifts with a quiet, methodical focus. She scrubbed floors with steady strokes and arranged chairs with a reverence that felt personal. She never hurried or complained. To an outsider, she was just doing her job, but Ethan saw more. He saw a gentleness in her actions, as if she were caring for things that mattered deeply. It reminded him of how his mother used to fold his clothes, with a tenderness that elevated the simple task. One night, he saw her in the south hallway near the guest suites. An elderly man was struggling with his wheelchair on the thick carpet. Ethan watched as Aaliyah approached without hesitation. She knelt beside the man, speaking to him softly. With a smile, she adjusted his footrest, then pulled a hand-knitted, faded scarf from her cart and wrapped it around his shoulders. "There," she said, her voice carrying just enough for Ethan to hear. "Now you look like someone who's been loved his whole life," the man chuckled. "I have been, but not for a while." Aaliyah smiled back and slowly guided him down the hall, as if it were the most important task of her night. The moment stayed with him. He began noticing more. Aaliyah was always on time, always worked her graveyard shift in solitude, avoiding the staff lounge and long breaks. At the end of her shift, she wouldn't leave through the main entrance. Instead, she would slip down a service hallway toward an old equipment storage area with no cameras. He didn't confront her, but the questions mounted. Was she living in the hotel? He started staying later, timing his walks with the end of her shift. She never seemed to see him. Then one night, around 3:10 a.m., he watched her emerge from the janitor's closet near the loading dock. She carried a folded blanket and a small photo frame. Hidden in the shadows, he saw her move like a ghost down the hallway and disappear into the old supply room on B2. He waited. 10 minutes passed. Finally, his curiosity won. He followed her to the supply room door. The light inside was dim. He reached for the handle, then stopped, peering through a crack in the frame. Aaliyah had arranged a stack of clean towels into a makeshift bed. She sat cross-legged, her back to him, clutching the small picture frame. After a long moment, she pulled a thin blanket over her shoulders and lay down, curling into herself. A soft, weary sigh escaped her, a sound that resonated deep in Ethan's chest. Her hand rested over the photo as she closed her eyes. He stood there, frozen. The woman who cleaned with dignity and comforted strangers was sleeping in a supply room. His hand tightened on the doorknob, but he hesitated. He watched her chest rise and fall, her dark hair spread across the towels. He slowly released the handle and stepped away in silence. Sometimes, he thought, the most desperate cries are the ones no one can hear. It was nearly midnight when Ethan found Aaliyah sitting alone in the back stairwell, her arms wrapped tightly around her knees. The cold concrete offered little warmth, but she didn't seem to notice. He paused at the top of the stairs before descending. "I thought this was the one place no one else came," she said without looking at him. Ethan stopped a few steps above her. "I'll leave if you want." She shook her head. "No, you can stay. It's just quieter here." He sat 2 steps below her, maintaining a comfortable distance. They sat in silence for a time, the air thick but not awkward. Aaliyah stared at the peeling paint on the wall, her eyes distant. "I used to dream about stairs like this," she said softly. Ethan tilted his head. "What do you mean?" She smiled faintly. "Hospitals, medical schools, all those old buildings with echoing halls. I thought I'd walk them in a white coat, carrying charts, saving lives." He looked at her, surprised. "You studied medicine?" She nodded once. 2.5 years at Boston Medical. Full scholarship. I was top of my class. He waited, letting her continue. "My dad died when I was 12. My mom raised my little brother and me by herself. She worked 2 jobs. He's autistic, nonverbal, needing full-time care. He's bright but trapped. I always wanted to fix things for them." Her voice trembled slightly. "I studied hard, got in. I was going to be a pediatric neurologist. That was the dream." She trailed off. "Then she got sick again." Aaliyah continued. "Mom, breast cancer, stage 4. It came back so fast. I tried to keep up, classes by day, hospital by night, taking care of Malik in between. But the bills piled up, and time ran out." A breath hitched in her throat. "She passed away during my 3rd year. I missed 2 exams to be with her. They wouldn't let me retake them. I lost my scholarship. Then the apartment. Then everything." Ethan swallowed, his chest tight. "I sent Malik to live with a friend of hers across town. I took this job because it paid cash and didn't ask questions. I told myself it was just for a month or 2." Aaliyah let out a soft, bitter laugh. "It's been almost a year." She finally turned to him, but her eyes wouldn't meet his. She pulled a crumpled vinyl wallet from her pocket and carefully unfolded a tattered student ID. The colors were faded, but her younger, smiling face was clear. She held it out. "I keep this," she said quietly. "Not because I think I'll get back there, but to remember I was once someone who believed I could." Ethan took the card, staring at her name, Aaliyah Brooks, printed beneath the university logo. He handed it back. She tucked it away like a precious relic. "I don't steal. I don't lie. I just try to stay invisible," she whispered. "People don't help what they can't see." Ethan's heart ached. He felt the full weight of how little he knew about the quiet lives moving through his empire of polished marble. "I see you," he said softly. Aaliyah looked up, her expression unreadable, but for the first time, she didn't look away. They fell into an unplanned rhythm. Every night, after a shift and before his rounds ended, they would meet in the forgotten stairwell. Aaliyah always brought 2 paper-wrapped sandwiches, one for him, offered with a shy glance. Ethan never said no. In return, he brought a thermos of hot tea, a chocolate bar, or a boiled egg. It was their quiet ritual. They talked. She asked about his old job, and he invented a maintenance background at a hotel in Cleveland, weaving just enough truth into the fiction. He hated the deceit, but needed to understand her without the influence of his title. In turn, Aaliyah shared pieces of her life. She told him about her brother Malik, how he would hum when he wanted something. She spoke of her mother's terrible baking and how they'd laugh over burnt cookies. Sometimes she would stop mid-sentence, catching herself. Ethan never pushed. He just listened. One night, Aaliyah looked at him and said, "You clean windows wrong." He blinked. "Excuse me. Your strokes are circular. You need vertical passes. Less streaking." He raised an eyebrow. "You're telling me I've been cleaning windows wrong my whole life?" "I'm telling you you've been doing it wrong since the first day you picked up a rag," she replied, a grin spreading across her face. He laughed, a real, open sound. "Fine, show me." And she did, with a spare rag on the stairwell door's glass panel. He copied her, and they both ended up laughing so hard they had to sit down. Yet beneath the laughter, Ethan saw the fatigue in her steps and the slight limp in her left foot after a long shift. Her shoes were falling apart. So he did something. He quietly bought a pair of sturdy, weatherproof work shoes, supportive and a half size up. He tucked them inside the cabinet with her cleaning supplies. Inside one shoe, he slipped a note in his slanted script. Asterisk, someone like you shouldn't be walking through life in pain. You deserve better with every step star. The next night, she arrived on the stairwell holding the shoes. Her eyes were glassy. You did this? She whispered. Ethan looked at her gently. You work hard. It's the least someone could do. She sat beside him, her fingers tracing the shoebox. Her carefully built walls began to crack. Suddenly, Aaliyah broke. Tears streamed down her cheeks. Not from exhaustion, but because for the first time in so long, someone had seen her. I don't cry, she whispered, wiping at her face. I stopped doing that a long time ago. You don't have to stop here, Ethan said softly. She turned to him, her face flushed, her eyes red, but behind the tears was relief and something that looked like hope. The morning shift hadn't started, but the service hallway was bustling with commotion. Aaliyah stood frozen, her back against the supply closet door. Her few belongings, a blanket, a picture frame, a worn hoodie, were spilled on the floor. Two supervisors stood over her. We found her sleeping here again, the senior manager said sharply. That's grounds for immediate termination. Company policy is clear. It was just for a moment, Aaliyah pleaded, her voice trembling. My feet were hurting. I just needed to sit down. No one is paying you to nap, the woman snapped. You're done here. Aaliyah's face crumpled as she bent to collect her things, her hands fumbling with the photo, her cheeks burning with shame. Then a voice cut through the air, calm but firm. That will be enough. All eyes turned. Ethan stood at the end of the hall, still in his maintenance jacket. He walked forward with a quiet authority that silenced everyone. Who are you? The supervisor demanded. Ethan's gaze remained on Aaliyah. Step away from her. The manager frowned. Excuse me? Are you in charge of this department? Ethan reached for his zipper, pulled off the jacket to reveal a crisp dress shirt, and unpinned the fake name badge, letting it fall. He stood tall. My name is Ethan Whitmore, he said clearly. I'm the CEO of this hotel group. A stunned silence fell. A nearby janitor gasped. Aaliyah stared at him, her mouth agape. I've been here undercover for several weeks, Ethan continued. I've seen enough to know what needs to change. But this, he gestured to Aaliyah, is not what's wrong with this place. He turned to the supervisors. You will not fire her. She is not the problem. She is the reason this place still has a soul. He looked at the manager. You're dismissed. I'll speak with you later. The hallway emptied in an instant. Ethan turned to Aaliyah, who hadn't moved. She looked at him as if he were a stranger. Aaliyah, stop. Her voice was low and broken. You lied to me, she whispered. He stepped closer. I never lied about who I was to you. I just didn't tell you everything. You needed to pretend, she cut in, her eyes brimming with tears. You listened to my stories. You took my food. You sat with me every night. You made me think, her voice cracked. You made me think I wasn't alone. Ethan reached for her. Aaliyah, I meant every word. Everything I felt was real. It is real. She stepped back. Do you know how hard it is to trust anyone when the world already looks right through you? She asked, her voice shaking. And then the one person who saw you turns out to have been hiding behind a mask. She clutched the blanket to her chest as tears streamed down her face. I told you things I've never told anyone. And I saw you, Ethan said quietly. Every part, even the ones you try to hide. But she shook her head. I don't know who you are anymore without another word. She turned and walked away, her shoulders stiff with pain. Ethan didn't follow. He stood alone in the hallway, surrounded by silence and regret, the mask now useless, because the one person he wanted to see him had already turned away. Aaliyah left the hotel in silence. Her chest felt empty, the air stolen from her the moment Ethan revealed his identity. It wasn't just the lie. It was the hope, the foolish hope that someone had finally seen her for who she was, not as a project to be fixed. She returned to the small room where a 13-year-old brother, Malik, was staying with an old family friend. The space was cramped and smelled of detergent. Malik sat on the floor, building with colored blocks. He didn't speak, but his eyes met hers with a familiar, wordless comfort. The next morning, Aaliyah took Malik to an assessment at an early intervention center. The moment they walked in, she knew something was wrong. The center was immaculate, far beyond what she could afford, with glass-walled classrooms and one-on-one specialists. She approached the front desk, certain there had been a mistake. "My brother, Malik Brooks, has an appointment, but I can't afford this place." The woman smiled and handed her a sealed envelope. "We've been expecting you. This is for you." Aaliyah opened it. Inside was a comprehensive, personalized treatment plan for Malik: therapy, speech training, support, and next to every service was the word, paid. On the final page, in a familiar, slanted script, was one sentence: "No one can study well when their little brother is being left behind by the world." Her breath caught. It was Ethan. No signature, but she knew his handwriting. The truth of his action hit her harder than any words. While she was mourning a loss of trust, he was quietly helping Malik. As she helped her brother with his coat, something slipped from his pocket. A pair of brand-new, child-sized shoes, the same sturdy brand he had given her. That night, she couldn't sleep, reconciling the lie she felt with the unspoken truth of his kindness. Sometimes, she realized, people wear masks not to deceive, but to protect the parts of themselves that still believe in doing good. Just before sunrise, Aaliyah returned to the hotel. She walked to the side entrance near the executive offices and left a small canvas bag at the CEO's door. Inside was the pair of work shoes Ethan had given her, now scuffed and worn, but intact. Next to them was a home-cooked lunch, still warm. Between them was a small, folded note, written as if on a doctor's prescription pad. It said only one sentence: "Asterisk, I learned how to walk alone, but if you're still standing there, I'd like to try again. On these feet with you, star." Ethan found the bag just after dawn. He carefully opened it, pulling out the well-worn shoes, the warm meal, and the note. He read her words, and a soft smile touched his lips, not of triumph, but of relief. That night, at 10 p.m., Aaliyah stood before the old supply closet. Her hands trembled as she opened the door. The tiny room was transformed. On the wall, framed, was the photo of her mother and Malik. Below it, a bookshelf held medical texts and a box labeled Malik with therapy supplies. In the center sat a pair of pristine white nursing shoes beside a laminated, reinstated student ID for Aaliyah Brooks. On the opposite wall, a plaque read, "The closet for those who dared to continue." Her breath hitched. She turned, and there was Ethan. No jacket, no title, just him. "I didn't do this out of pity," he said quietly. "You reminded me what really matters. It's about people who keep going when no one's looking." She stepped forward, her voice a whisper. "You gave me back my brother's laughter. You gave me back me. I only helped you see what was already there. You saw me. I never stopped." She placed her hand on his chest. There were no speeches, no grand promises, just two people choosing to stay. In the weeks that followed, Aaliyah returned to medical school, her tuition quietly covered. She became a peer advisor, her story inspiring other struggling students. Malik thrived, speaking more and even painting a portrait of his sister. Together, Aaliyah and Ethan founded the Shelter Project, offering support to students like her, staffed by people who knew what it felt like to be unseen. One spring morning, Aaliyah stood before her first pediatric class, her name badge catching the light. Her voice was steady. "I used to sleep in a supply closet," she said. "Not because I was lazy, but because I had nowhere else to dream." She paused. "But I'm here to tell you that light finds us in the darkest places. And dreams, they wait. Sometimes longer than we'd like, but they do wait." At the back of the room, leaning against the wall, Ethan smiled. If this story touched your heart, if you've ever felt invisible in a world that moves too fast, remember this: you are not alone. There is light in the darkest corners, and sometimes hope is waiting right where you thought you lost it. Thank you for watching Ball Bouncers Tales, where every tale is told not just to be heard, but to be felt. If you want more powerful, emotional stories of compassion and resilience, Please subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a moment with us. Ball Bouncers Tales, where every story is a heartbeat. We tell them so you never forget that miracles are real.